Nicole. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here tonight with you again. And tonight we'll be talking about caring for mixed age groups. And I did do a similar presentation like this last year, but I've mixed it up a little bit. So if you have watched that previous Caring for Mixed Age Groups presentation, you will get some new content. The strategies will be similar, but the content and the activity ideas will be different. So you can get excited and be sure to take notes as we go through so you can use these activities in your settings. As we get started, I'd really love to know just get a sense of the ages that you care for. So in the chat box, if you can just give me a range, I'll try to tailor some of my notes to the ages of kids that you're actually caring for. But I'm assuming for our purposes tonight that it's a mix of, infants and toddlers, maybe pre-K, maybe a few older kids as well. And so I'll try to encourage you to think about how to modify activities for all ages of kids. So let's see if I can, there you go. Birth to 11, okay. Birth to 12. Okay, so for some of you who are caring for older kids, and older, I mean beyond, 6, for us, our real sweet spot is 0 to 5, and especially those pre-K, but you can, of course, get those older kids especially involved as we go through some of these activities to help you facilitate or really level up the learning for them. So that's very exciting that you're caring for such a broad group of ages. Okay, so let's get started. Thanks so much for answering that. So multi-age groups, like I said, are great for so many reasons. They offer children opportunities to build social skills like cooperation and problem solving. They learn from each other in so many ways. Older kids learn things like empathy and kindness, and they also get to practice helping the littler kids. Little kids often mimic older kids, and I'm sure you see this a lot. They try to take more risks. They might try new foods or attempt more complex physical activities because the older kids are doing it. Mixed age group care also lends itself to meet the needs of individuals. Even during group activities, kids are given flexibility to learn at their own pace. And we're really going to talk about that tonight. So here's a look at what we're going to be talking about today. Today's webinar, of course, is all about supporting you as you care for kids of different ages. And today we'll cover some of the challenges and opportunities of caring for mixed age groups. We're going to talk about some general strategies to get kids working and growing together. And at the end, I'm going to share several activities that you can use in your own work with kids. Some of our learning goals are really to see how older and younger kids can learn from each other. The important part, most of what we're going to talk about, is how to plan activities to accommodate various ages, and then how to apply these strategies in your work. We know that there are many challenges that come along with caring for kids of different ages, but here at Sesame, we like to look on the bright side and see that opportunities actually lie in those challenging situations. So tonight we're going to go through a few examples of challenges that you might face in your program and then try to reframe them as opportunities. So I'll present some strategies to use along the way when we're tackling each of those opportunities. Okay, so the first one is keeping kids safe. As we all know, keeping kids safe is of utmost importance, but it can be challenging when caring for kids of different ages. There are just so many things to consider and keep in mind. For instance, we might need to think about objects. So small objects need to be kept out of reach for little kids, and toys for toddlers need to be accessible enough so that they don't hurt themselves by, say, climbing or reaching too high. And we also know that kids of all ages, and toddlers and olds especially have lots of energy to expend. You might have seen your living room a racetrack or something where kids are running laps around the couch and through the halls. And we definitely don't want our little ones who love tummy time or are just beginning to crawl to become speed bumps as big kids get active. So we really need to think about how to keep kids safe in our spaces. The opportunity here is to get creative with your space. And one way to do that is, of course, how to arrange your space. And a couple of ways to do this and to make sure everything is accommodating is to see things through a child's eyes. So consider things like safety and accessibility. So a good way to see through a child's eyes is to actually go through your space on their level. So you might feel a little bit silly, but you could get down on your hands and knees. You could even get down on your belly to see things from kids' vantage point and help you think outside of your usual vantage point. As a bonus, you could have older kids join you in this activity and try to help them remember what they were like or what the growth that they've experienced is, or just help them understand a little bit better what little kids might be experiencing. So you can consider things like safety and accessibility. Do you notice any sharp edges or rough spots on the floor that need to be addressed? Can kids access the toys that are meant for them, or are they too far out of reach? And so really we want to just look at your space from a childlike lens of exploration. You can also consider things like learning goals and the actual activities that you have planned. So does your space accommodate them? For instance, if you're doing a story time or a crafting activity, does each child have a place to sit comfortably? Is the lighting correct? Is it too for babies who are laying on their backs or their tummies and looking up at the ceiling? Thinking about all those sensory experiences as well. And same for meal times. Can all kids reach the table? Can they move their chair by themselves? Are they running into things? Or are there spill hazards, things like that? So just look at each space from a vantage point of your child and also the activities that you plan to do with them. So the next challenge is finding and planning age-appropriate activities. So during some activities, you might find that older kids might get a little bored. Younger kids could get frustrated when they can't accomplish certain tasks. So we definitely want to keep kids interested and engaged. It's important to remember that kids learn and grow at their own pace, and that any activity at all can help kids of all ages learn. So what's the opportunity here? Really, it's to follow kids' lead. This is kind of a big one. So when you present an activity or some materials, sensory materials or crafting materials, don't be afraid at first to let kids get creative on their own and show you what they're interested in. And your role as the caregiver and the teacher really is to facilitate their learning by layering in questions and conversation. So you can find what they're interested in, kind of what direction they're going, and then ask some questions, some scaffolding questions, like you can ask about what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. You could ask about how things work or what things are for. So for instance, if they're building with blocks or even constructing some crafts, you could say, what are you building? And they might say, a bridge. And then you could say, well, what's a bridge for? How do you build a bridge? What goes under a bridge? Who uses the bridge? Do those people or things that use the bridge, do they walk? Do they run? Do they drive? They use pogo sticks to get across the bridge. You can really layer in a lot of conversation and expand kids' imagination, but also their learning of, things like physics and engineering about bridges and transportation and getting from one point to the next. There are really so many opportunities there, and if the child is already interested in bridges for some reason or another, you're just capitalizing on that interest. Another thing to remember is that different ages often mean different levels of interest and ability. So if you do see an older child getting bored or disinterested, maybe ask them questions about the activity itself. So if they're playing a game that maybe they think, oh, this is a little kid's game, I'm too old for this, or I know all the rules, maybe you can ask them how they might reimagine that activity. How would they change the rules? How can they change up the materials to make it more engaging or more fun or more challenging? It can be a really fun activity to let kids explore and problem solve about the things that they, might not be that interested in anymore, to make them more fun again. On the flip side, if you see a little one get frustrated, you can, maybe they can't accomplish a task, or they're not keeping up with the bigger kids, you can help them by breaking the activity down into smaller or more manageable sections. And I really want to emphasize that you should congratulate them often when they accomplish even just a little bit, and help the older kids also reiterate those affirming words and those congratulatory words for them, because before they know it, they'll build their confidence and they'll be competing and playing just alongside the big kids. And that'll be a really fun day that they can look back on how far they've come. Just real quickly, I want to toss out an idea. Since we're talking about modifying activities, I want you to, after the webinar, just spend some time thinking. I think creative thinking and really thoughtfulness are key when it comes to adapting activities for different ages. Really just a little bit of time thinking through the activities that you already do or that kids are already interested in can be a great way to help tweak them and make them more interesting or richer learning experiences for kids of different ages. So we'll talk about milestones in just a second, but things you might want to consider are maybe physical, emotional, executive functioning skills, things like literacy and numeracy, all those different kinds of skills, and how they might interplay with the activities that you already do. So maybe you can elevate vocabulary words for older kids when you're reading or doing an activity. Maybe older kids can help you set up the space for activities or help explain the rules to younger kids or really help them along. And then little kids, can you add more sensory experience for them? Can you introduce different things to touch or to smell or to hear? Can you add more color? So babies, of course, are developing color, and their visual perception is really developing. So how can you incorporate more of that into activities that may not be geared necessarily toward an infant? So those are some things to keep in mind, and that's what I want you to do after this webinar, is to really think about the things that you already do and see how you can make them more accommodating to different ages. So let's talk about the next challenge, which is keeping routines. This is the final challenge we're going to talk about. And sticking to routines is really tough. Babies need feeding or naps, while older kids have all that energy to use up, like we talked about. And preschool kids or maybe older kids have homework to do, right? So they need a specific type of quiet time. And it can be challenging to make sure that all the schedules line up. An added layer to keeping routine is that kids of all ages, and especially older kids that might be going through a lot at school or coming to your program after school, They might have difficulty transitioning from one space to another. So maybe from school to your facility or from home to your program. Routines are different in those places and rules are different. They can vary. So for example, mealtime at home might look really different from mealtime in your program. There probably aren't as many kids around at home during mealtime, whereas in your space there are lots of kids and lots of people to accommodate. Nap time might also look different. Might have a different sleeping environment or different comfort items. So rules can vary and environments can vary. So that adds a different layer to keeping routines. But the opportunity here is to practice, for you, the caregiver, to practice some flexibility and joy. So first and foremost, we want to keep an open mind and again, understand that children might be struggling with feeling comfortable or just remembering that there are different rules in these different spaces. So we need to have a lot of patience with them. Next, we can try to help alleviate this transition time by communicating in creative ways. So we could repeat instructions more frequently and give kids reminders of what comes next or how things are done in your program. So for little kids who maybe aren't reading, you could use visual reminders like signs on the wall or signs on different doors. Maybe label the bathroom door with the steps of how to wash your hands. You could also use things like music or movement for cues to go to different activities. I know that some caregivers, they have, they dance to their line. So we're going to line up and we're going to dance our way there. Or we're going to count down from 5, which is also a focusing technique to get kids centered and focused. So there are lots of ways to give kids cues that are not so dependent on rules and having them remember, because we know that little kids especially only can remember developmentally maybe 2 steps at a time, but maybe just 1 step at a time. And of course, older kids can remember and hold more information in their mind. So you want to get them involved with helping the younger kids remember what's next or how to do things or how to go about their day. So another thing that we can do as caregivers, especially when it comes to keeping routines, and again, we're practicing flexibility and joy, is that we want to keep our cool. So when hiccups happen or meltdowns or confusion, or when things go wrong or awry, remember that kids are watching you, and that's a good thing. So your calm demeanor can be such a good role model for keeping cool under pressure. It can help kids understand that flexible thinking is really an asset for them. So that's the ability to think through different solutions when you face problems, and this is really foundational to resilience. So I really encourage you, if something goes wrong or plans need to change, be talking through what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and how you're solving that problem. So maybe you do get flustered. Say, I'm a little flustered. I need to take some deep breaths to calm down. So I'm calming down now. I feel much better. Let's think through the solutions. And then you offer some solutions, and you tell them, you articulate why you chose one solution to try first. For older kids especially, you can help get involved with this process. What are some solutions that you guys think of, and help them get involved with this problem-solving process. That way they learn from your example. And then finally, we want to build in empathy and into our special times together. So we can use routines as an exploration in differences and similarities. So we could talk about what's different at home or different at school than about your program. For younger kids who might be pre-K and heading into school next year, they can really benefit from having a little bit of a heads up of what's to come in school, what they can expect, and how the older kids are experiencing those differences, and they can learn from that. And then for older kids, they can look to the younger kids and kind of remember how far they've come. I think that's so huge in building kids' confidence and resilience, is just to see how far they've come, in physical or emotional skills, or reading and writing, of course. It's really, really exciting to see, maybe they were only able to point to a couple of words, but now they can read a whole book by themselves. So just building in that celebration along the way is really important. Okay. So this is a key point when selecting activities and modifying the activities that you already do in your program. And that thing is milestones. So understanding how kids' brains and skills develop is key to choosing age-appropriate activities and modifying activities to fit your group. Children are developing so much in the early years of their lives, and you guys know this. They're developing social emotional skills, physical skills, and executive functioning skills, to name a few. And so it's really vital as caregivers to have a good sense of what to expect from children in these different spheres as they age. So luckily for you guys, we have a whole page on Sesame Street and Communities dedicated to this topic of milestones. There you will find articles about different ages and stages. You'll find videos that model how different families work through, sometimes those challenging moments of growth, like meal times or saying goodbye, transitions, things like that. And there are also resources that you can share with parents. One idea to share with parents is this set of Monster Moments books. They are digital storybooks that come along with a handful of printables that help parents celebrate their child's own growth, development, and accomplishments. And so maybe if they have an infant, if that's 1 year old, they can read through this book and see all the different milestones that their child might have met. And then they can read about older years and get a sense of what's to come and what they can expect as their child grows. The next two slides show an example of some of those executive functioning milestones that children do experience at different ages. And as you know, executive functioning skills include things like planning, controlling impulses, focusing attention, which helps kids learn and hold information in their minds. Also help them control their actions and follow tasks through to the end. So these executive functioning milestones can be especially important when planning activities for your program. So I'll give you just a moment to look at some of these examples, for 0 to 24 months. And keep in mind, these are pretty general. Every child develops at their own pace. So these are just sort of general guidelines. But in 0 to 24 months, kids can get fussy or cry when activities don't change quickly enough. They might start to remember that unseen objects are still there. So again, playing peekaboo. They might remember that you're actually behind those hands. When they get to be 2 years old, they can start following two-step instructions. They're a little bit better at self-control. They can resist a temptation for just a little bit. They don't have a lot of resistance there. Things like that. And as we age up, we will see that at 3 years old, you can start remembering sentence sequences of 3 to 4 objects. You can sometimes follow don't commands. You can start to understand when others have different preferences or knowledge or skills. At 4-year-olds, you're starting to remember a little bit more, hold a little bit more information and steps or instructions in your mind. And you can start sorting items and resorting, which is fun for math games and board game play. And at 5 to 6 years old, of course, you're starting to hold more dependent rules in mind. So maybe multi-step instructions. You can wait a little bit longer, delay that gratification. So all sorts of things. So these are just examples of executive functioning milestones, and you'll find those again on that milestones topic page. And you'll find milestones also for other things like social emotional skills. So those are really handy things. Those are great to hand to parents as well, or new parents, about what to expect from their child. So we are about halfway through, probably over halfway through here, and we've covered a lot. So quickly, I would just love to know what strategies or challenges that have kind of stuck out to you, and maybe one thing that you want to try to focus on in the next month or so with your program. So just chat to me in the chat box so I know you're still hanging out with me. Awesome. So we're getting some answers in. Thank you for hanging here with me. Some of you are saying, I'm trying to read all these answers. You guys are coming in fast. So keeping their attention longer. We're going to talk about, you guys are going to work through meltdowns, transitions. Awesome. So Cynthia said she's going to continue the use of older children teaching younger and building on all levels. Wonderful. Nap time and routines coming up a lot, and asking more questions. Great. Patricia, that's great. Transitions. Oh my gosh, there's so many of you involved. So this is really great. I'm glad you're keeping up with me, and I'm going to work on some of these things in the next month. I'd love to hear how these things go for you. All right, for this next part of the webinar, we are going to talk about some activities. And all the activities that I'm going to share with you today can be found for free, both in English and Spanish, on sesamestreetincommunities.org. I'm going to just quickly type that into the chat box here. So that's where you're going to find all of these resources, and I'll also send out some follow-up information with Nicole for you guys to have tomorrow. So let's look at some activities and talk about ways to modify them for different age groups. Okay, the first one that is kind of setting the stage for us is an activity called Everyday Moments Activity Cards. And what these are digital flip cards that you can find on our Caring for Kids topic page. And how they work is that you open it up, and then you'll be able to select what age group you're working with. And again, since our sweet spot is really 0 to 5, that's kind of how we go up. You're going to have to get a little bit more creative with those older kids that you care for. But the great thing about older kids is that they can let you know how they want to get involved or how an activity might become more interesting. You know, they're really able to express themselves and get creative alongside you. So these brain builder cards the idea is really to leverage everyday routines, everyday moments. They give you different activities for those routines at those different age ranges. So for example, on the screen, what you're seeing now is that we've chosen that we're taking care of babies 0 to 1, and we have some indoor play time. Here is an activity. So we're going to make the most of tummy time. You can lay down and talk or sing to babies. You can place toys nearby so they can learn to reach and maybe start crawling to reach those toys. So if you were to flip through the cards, they would give you more ideas for different routines. They're very simple. They're definitely very actionable and easy to do. Again, they leverage everyday moments and routines. And these are really wonderful also to share with parents if they have a new baby or if they need some activities to do at home. You can share these routine cards with them. So these everyday moments cards leverage everyday moments and routines. And so for the rest of the webinar, we're going to do the same thing with the activities, and we're really around different times in your day that you might be interacting with both kids and parents. So the first one is about hellos and goodbyes. So the top of your day and the end of your day. Greetings and goodbyes are really great times for customizing and adapting for different age groups. My email, but do a custom welcome. I know a lot of you do that, maybe a high five or a handshake or a hug. I know that some of you all have really creative ways of allowing children to choose which greeting they'd like. Debbie is one of our favorite family child care providers, and she has them pick if they want a robot hug or a teddy bear hug, things like that. So there are lots of creative ways to do that. You can have kids find their cubby number or their name or their own materials. You could have, if kids are arriving at different times, you can make sure to have age-appropriate self-play activities, so sensory books for little babes. You could have maybe older kids come and sit down and start up an ongoing project that they've been working on for a while. Another idea is to have maybe a daily scavenger hunt. So this printable that you'll see here is called Sign Me Up, which might be a great one for sort of back to school time if your programs are in sync with the school year. I know many of you go all year round, but if they're in sync with the school year or you have new kids joining your program, they can do a friend scavenger hunt where kids can sign their names, or if kids aren't talking, maybe do fingerprint or thumbprints with a little washable ink. So that printable is available to you. You could also modify to have different kinds of scavenger hunts each day or each week, maybe a shape hunt or a letter hunt, and just write down or just really find those things. Or if you've got a lot of time on your hand, maybe you actually place shapes like an Easter egg hunt where they can gather those shapes and put them into a basket or something like that. So that's a great way to sort of modify a printable activity into something really unique and hands-on. One thing I don't have on the slide here to represent is that you can also welcome parents into your program as well. So you might have a notebook laid out for them where they can leave you a short note about how they're doing or anything, particular about their child, or just leave you a nice hello or goodbye. You could also offer coffee or cold lemonade or something like that to make parents' days just a little bit brighter. And then for the end of the day, one idea, that's why I have this little alligator, I don't know, he's maybe a crocodile. Either way, you can have silly animal goodbyes. So kids could pick an animal that they want to act like as they're saying goodbye to you. You could say, see you later, alligator. After a while, crocodile. Bye-bye, butterfly. Or see you soon, big baboon. So kids can really act it out and they leave on a playful note. That's a really great way to to include kids as well. Okay, so our next sort of everyday moment or routine, it could be during a mealtime or even just imaginary playtime. On the screen, you'll see another digital interactive. This is another sort of flip card, digital flip card. And the idea here is that kids can play restaurant. So at meal times or just during imaginative playtime, kids can play restaurant by role playing. And role playing is great for mixed age groups because each child can fill a role that's appropriate for them. For instance, if you were in an imaginary restaurant setting, babies could be customers or be food critics. So, you know, babies might not be able to verbalize their opinions, but they will definitely show you what they think of today's entree. They can be very interesting food critics. In the meantime, older kids can really fill out those other important roles, like maybe somebody could be your sous chef and help prepare the meal for others. Other kids could be a host or a hostess. You could have a waiter, a cashier. Others could help set the table and serve one another. So there are lots of opportunities, especially in role play activities, and especially in a setting like a restaurant where there are many roles to fill. You could extend this activity, of course, into an arts and crafts session or something like that. You could have kids work together to create a menu, or you could use paper or felt or maybe even found objects to create fanciful foods. Some other kitchen or mealtime related activities could be kitchen rhythm. So you could prepare meals, and while you're doing that, invite kids to explore rhythm and music and sound with plastic containers or wooden spoons. You could lead them in an echo activity. So you could tap a simple rhythm and they could try to repeat it back to you. You could also just have a fun conversation about music, or if they were to start a food-themed band, maybe what their band name would be. I bet you'd get some really great answers to that question. Okay. So next is another activity that you could do during playtime or when you want kids to get active. So when you're working on those cardiovascular skills, getting those healthy habits really ingrained in them, an easy activity, very simple, any space will do. You could do this inside or outside, is a dance party. And you could keep this simple. You know, you could just turn on a favorite song and invite kids to wiggle or bop their heads or groove along, show us the most trendy moves. I know that flossing thing is very trendy right now. So you could keep it simple with a dance party. You could also get some help from your Sesame Street friends. One way to do that would be using this Grover's Playground Workout interactive. So this is a little spinner. You would choose a character or hit the spin wheel, and each character would show you a move, and then kids could copy that move and move along with them. I think a great way to customize this for a family childcare setting, especially if you have, you know, the same kids day in and day out, is that you can make your own spinner with the kids' faces on it and the kids' names, and you could spin that and have the child show off their move for everyone to copy. And then another activity is for after you have worked up all that sweat, a story time could really help kids cool down. So this story, which is called Breathe Buddy Breathe, packs an extra bonus because in it, our monster friend Buddy, he teaches us a belly breathing technique or a calm down problem solving technique called Breathe, Think, Do. And you might be familiar with our app. He is the same monster in that. So He's a great buddy because he teaches kids some great resilience skills. So children of all ages, as you guys know this, can enjoy and engage with and learn from story time. So for example, babies, if you have a physical book, they might want to taste that book or at least turn the pages. But if you're using a virtual digital book like this one, you can have a screen or click on the next button, things like that. Older kids can help you read the words, can help you narrate the story, and all kids can help act it out. And this book is really great for acting it out, of course, because he's doing some deep belly breaths. So he's breathing in and out 3 times. And then as you go through the story, he goes through the rest of the steps. So he's breathing to calm himself down. Then he's thinking through 3 options or strategies to solve the problem. And then he's trying one. And in this story, he gets a little bit of help from his dad. And in the same way, kids are learning that you are there for them. You are there to help them through challenges and help them solve their problems as well. So this is a really nice story because it teaches a great strategy. It's easy to replicate in that they can act out this belly breathing technique, and it helps actually physically calm them down after being really active during the day. So this is a great story to read for maybe nap time or just quiet time, or when kids, older kids have homework, and they need to really focus in, or if they have a lot on their plate, help them with the breathe, think, do activity. So that's one idea. And this is the last activity I'm going to share tonight because we are wrapping it up pretty soon, and I want to take your questions. So this is the last activity, and I really wanted to think of an activity that kids could do together, but that was a little bit more creative and also allowed for some individual play. So I worked with our content team to think of this, and we thought of a collaborative art project. So this one, our idea was that you could use this storybook called Grover's Underwater Hugs, or another story that features something, a theme that's really broad, like space. We really liked the theme of ocean in this one. So you could read the story, and this storybook actually has adaptability built in for different age groups. So you can have a fully narrated story. You could have just individual words for kids to follow along. So just definitely check out this story, and there's actually a series of them that you can adapt for different ages. But anyway, what we liked about this story is the theme of ocean. So you can read the story, you can have a conversation about what lives in the ocean, what the ocean is, what it's made of, what it looks like, all kinds of things, what it smells like, what food comes from the ocean, all kinds of things. And then you could do a creative art project. So for instance, if we're sticking with the ocean theme, you could create a large ocean maybe on a wall or just on a large poster board or something like that. And then you can invite kids of all ages. So if your littlest kids are finger painting or scribbling, that's a-okay. Give them maybe a fish shape to scribble on. And then for older kids, invite them to think of something creative and make something creative that would go in the ocean. So maybe they make a whale or a boat or a submarine like Grover has, or some sea creatures like sea urchins or anemone, or an octopus. So the idea here is that each child is working individually at their respective skill set, and then they're putting all those pieces together in a collaborative art piece that they'll be able to look at and say, I did this part, but my friend did this part, and look, they're all living in this same art project. I think that could be really rewarding and also allow for kids to develop and participate at their own skill level in a non-competitive way. So this is one of my favorite activity ideas. So if any of you guys do this or something like it, please send us pictures or something. We would love to know how that goes. Okay, so we are pretty much wrapped up. Let's recap real quick. You guys are really good at modifying activities, and I think the key here is to know milestones, like we talked about. So I definitely encourage you to leverage that milestones topic page to just refresh on how kids are developing in different facets of their lives. And then remember that kids learn at their own pace and they can learn from any activity, especially with your help. So if you are layering in those scaffolding conversations and giving them sensory materials or giving them opportunities to lead or to follow even, that's where you come in and you play such a huge role in leveraging any activity to help kids learn. So that's what I have for you. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you got some good ideas. We can take questions now, Nicole, if you're ready. And anytime you can keep in touch with us at communities@sesame.org or on our 2 Facebook groups. We have Sesame Street and Communities and Sesame Street and Community Providers, which is a closed group. And we also have a new LinkedIn group that if you search Sesame Street and Communities on LinkedIn, you should be able to find us and request to get in there. We're starting to share a lot more on that group as well. So thank you so much for hanging in here with me, and I'm happy to take any questions you guys might have.
Okay, so I've kind of sorted through all of the great comments that have come in and tried to narrow it down to all the questions. But if you guys have any other questions, now is the time to send them in, so we'll see them. But I'll go ahead and pick out some. A lot of people are asking about like the cards that you mentioned. And
Thanks a lot.
yeah, about like where they are, how much they cost, the printable versions, if they're only in English, stuff like that.
Okay, absolutely. So Sesame Street and Communities, everything is absolutely free. You will not have to pay for anything. There are materials available in both English and Spanish, and you can get the Spanish version with the click of a button in the top left corner of that website. You can download all the printables. Many of the storybooks have printables or coloring sheets that go along with them. So after you've finished the storybook, you can download a coloring version of the storybook. So most of those have them, not all, but again, they're all free. We do have, some printed toolkits and some printed materials. And if you're interested in learning more about those, we can email you a catalog. Those are also available at no cost. So just email us and we can send you more details about that.
Okay, great. Trying to sort through some of them. One person is asking, saying that their preschoolers cry because they don't want to go home. Do you have an idea on what they can do because they cry to stay longer?
Yeah, you guys are just too fun for them. Yeah, so again, I would recommend a couple of resources on this website. You could, we have a topic around managing difficult behaviors. It might be handling tantrums, something like that. Transitions are really hard. I think the best advice I can give, just from a caregiving perspective, is to really prep them with expectations about what's coming up, what they're gonna maybe get excited about being at home or about leaving or about coming back the next day. Just really prep them with that sort of anticipation type of conversation, help reframe leaving the space to getting to do something new and exciting or getting to do something different. We also have some videos on the site that might be helpful just from a, parent perspective. Maybe you could watch it with parents and have them join in that conversation with you, because that's really a two-way street there. So it's not just about you transitioning them home. It's about the parents helping with that as well. So there are a couple of videos, and I'll link to them specifically to you in an email, Nicole, but that are about, transitions and goodbyes. So you can watch those and see if those are helpful as well.
Okay. Trying to sort through. We have a lot of great questions coming in, so hopefully we can get to as many as possible. Okay, we'll go with this one. How do you keep older kids away from new walkers who are more interested in pulling them off the wall or just pulling them down, I'm assuming?
That's a tough one. Yeah, so say that one more time, Nicole. Maybe I'm.
How do you stop like older kids from pulling down like younger kids that are new walkers is kind of how I was interpreting it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good question. I don't know, because I know that, I've just seen from, my nephews. I've kind of witnessed some of this, like where the older kid is really excited. A lot of times the older kids are really excited that, oh, well, they're walking now. They should be able to come along with me and go really fast. I think what could help is, talking about how we grow, and talking about how that younger child, that new walker, even though he is taking some steps, isn't at the level where he can go really fast. So you could maybe think about this from like an animal perspective, right? So maybe your little new walker is more like a turtle. So he's got to go at a slower pace, whereas the older kid is like a bunny and he's real fast. And so you have to be accommodating. You have to understand that even though you both can walk, like both animals can walk, you're going at different paces and you have to be patient. So you could talk about it in different ways like that. You might be able to find a story that talks about this a little bit better. You can definitely go back to those milestone storybooks that I mentioned at the very beginning. What I love about those books is that Grover narrates, and Grover is obviously an older child, and he's reading to his little cousin Marty, who's the subject of the book. So it's like a scrapbook about Marty's life and his milestones. So Grover is reading about what Marty has gone through in his first, second, and third years of life. And I think that might actually be a really good tool for you to read with kids and say, okay, so do you see any of these activities going on with your peers, with your friends in class? And how do you think that they feel, or what do you think that they could do next, or how do you think you could help them? Having those conversations, I think, is really important, and also just talking about physical boundaries is probably a good start too.
Okay, this one is saying that they're having an issue with their 3-year-old kids starting to emulate baby behaviors because they notice that the babies get attention when they cry or whine. And they're wondering how they can kind of deal with that and stop that behavior.
Oh, that is really interesting. Um, I don't know. I would maybe work on, um, making sure that your attention goes to them. We talked a little bit about affirmation and praise in this webinar. So maybe you could try, complimenting them when they're quiet, complimenting them when they're well behaved, when they're accomplishing big kid tasks, really affirming them in those things so that they're able to have those confidence boosts every once in a while. That's a really difficult one, and I will certainly talk with our content team to see if we can help you with a better answer, but that would be one place to start, I think.
Okay, so we have a lot of great questions, but I'm trying to kind of keep them more relevant to mixed age groups since there's a bunch of them. But a lot of them are also talking like asking about Sesame Street and Community's other materials. And so I would just, and Tara, you can correct me if I'm wrong, refer them to your website to kind of check out all of those other great resources and materials that you have if they have specific questions other than caring for mixed age groups.
Yep, absolutely. If you want to visit the site, and again, Nicole, I'll send out specific links to what we covered tonight. And then if you guys have any other questions regarding mixed age groups or anything else regarding the materials, you can, again, send us an email to communities@sesame.org, and we will do our best to help you out.
Great. Yeah. So like Tara said, we'll make sure to get you those resources emailed out along with the link to the recording of this webinar so you can watch it again and go over those resources. We'll also make sure to send you out the training certificates for attending this webinar so you can wait for that in your email. It'll take about, give us a week to send those out. And then we'll also be sending out the quiz for those of you that have been asking if you want to obtain the CEU credit. You can take that quiz and pass, and we'll put you down and make sure you have all the instructions on how to get that in your transcript. So with that, we'll go ahead and end. And thank you so much, Tara, for presenting tonight. And thank you, everyone, for coming and participating.
Thanks, everybody.